This morning, I want to tell you about my week a little bit. I got a phone call from a gentleman who said, Ian, could you give me some money? And I said, why do you want money? And he said, well, I need a contribution from Aura along with a lot of other foundations, because what I want to do is study the refugee issue. And I said, how do you want to study it? And he said, well, I want to know how big it is. And I want to know about the economic impacts, and then I'm going to report it back to you and others. I said, well, isn't that kind of like the house is on fire and you want to tell me how hot the fire is? I mean, we know there are lots of... And we bantered back and forth for a while, and I said, you know what, I'd gladly help you out, but I haven't got any money anyway, so that's... You know, organizations like the one I work with don't usually have a whole lot. The balance sheet is kind of weak. But it made me think about something. It made me think about a friend of mine who, this number of years ago, was a salesman in the United States. And he wanted to get from Pittsburgh to Roanoke, Virginia. And his idea was that he was going to go through West Virginia, and he had it all figured out how he was going to get there more quickly. He always thought he had the solutions to everything, that guy. So he got off the interstate, and if you've ever been to West Virginia, off the interstate is not a great idea. That doesn't work out too well. But he got off the interstate, and he got car trouble. And at the top of a hill, he sort of coasted down into this little burb, and there was a gas station. And went to the guy and said, listen, can you fix my car? And he said, oh yeah, I can fix your car, take a while. So he sat, and there was a lunch counter nearby, and he went into the lunch counter to get something to eat. And the same guy who was the mechanic came over and with kind of greasy hands and said, yeah, I'll make any burger you want. And he started to think to himself, well, wait a minute, you know, auto mechanics maybe, but I'll pass on the burger. So he sat out front for a while, and somebody came along and sat down, how you doing today? He said, hello, yeah. I don't understand, like, why is this garage here, and why is this terrible lunch counter here? And he said, well, see, you don't understand. This gentleman's wife died a number of years ago, and she ran the lunch counter, and he keeps it open just in case somebody comes along and needs something to eat. And the garage is here just in case somebody needs car repairs, because he's not really interested in doing car repairs. And in the course of the visit, they decided they couldn't fix the car immediately. They had to get a part from somewhere. And so he'd have to spend the night in this little burb. And they took him to a little cottage that was formerly a motel room, if you will. And the roof didn't leak, but everything else was kind of less than perfect. But he stayed there. The next morning, while driving to Roanoke, Virginia, he figured it out. The little burb was there to help him along his way. The reason for the mechanic being there was just in case you had a repair. The reason for all of these people being where they were in this little place was to help people along the way. It's what we're being asked to do. It doesn't always end up looking like what we need to do, but it is what we need to do. So I would invite us this morning to consider not being like the gentleman who wanted to add up how big the problem is. I think we'd be better to be less sophisticated if we had to be, and be folks in, you know, sort of the backwater of West Virginia who were there for the purpose the express purpose, however indelicately, of helping people along their way. And so what we're being asked to do is just that. I want to tell you about some of those people that are trying to find their way along. I get phone calls on a regular basis and emails and things of that nature from many places in the world with stories of families and their events. On my desk right now, for instance, we have a request to help a man who he's about 38, and for many years, the fact of his sexual orientation was kept a secret, but somebody decided to disclose it to a government that's very oppressive, and for money, for $25 Canadian. If you turn, in those nations, if you turn somebody in, you get money. Right? So for $25, he was sold out and he had to leave his home and so on. We have another circumstance on my desk just now where there's a family of 4, all of whom have lost their home. It was bombed. All of whom have been beaten. All of whom have been persecuted for their faith. All of whom had to walk many, many miles and take all the money they had to bribe street gangs and border guards and all those kinds of people. They have nothing left in terms of finance. They have nothing left in terms of possessions. They have nothing left except the 4 of them, and all the rest of their family, extended and otherwise, are now deceased. And they're sitting in a refugee camp, in a tent. They consider themselves fortunate to now be in a tent. Okay? That's their individual circumstance. And so I would suggest to us that these folks, these people are, maybe they are statistics that are important. Over 60 million persons are refugees. But they're much more than statistics. And they're much more than an academic exercise. It's human life, creations of our Father who are being mistreated. And it is our calling to do something about it. And in Canada, we can do something about it. The only place that can do it exactly the way we do it, Canadian citizens can say to their government, I want to help these people. I want to do something about it, and you can do it. Now, it's not simple, because nothing in government is simple, but it can be done. It's a tremendous blessing that we have in Canada. The other thing I would tell us is that we think helping people helps them, and it does. But the great thing about doing as we're asked to do is we are the beneficiaries actually. The benefit to us who help is greater than the benefit to the people who receive the help. It's an extraordinary situation, happens everywhere. And so I would say to you, in all the ways that you become involved, whether it's as a volunteer or a contributor or a cheerleader or a prayer, whatever it is, it will come back to you much greater than you have given. The refugee problem in the world is enormous because there are too many borders that are closed. Most of the borders of the world are closed. In other words, if you've got trouble, we don't want you. That's how it's said. But in Canada, we have this wonderful opportunity to aid people who are in desperate need. So I commend all of you for considering this, and I also want to commend you for all the other wonderful outreach work that you do. Really extraordinary. And while you deserve compliments for that, I want to tell you there's always more that we can do. And I invite you to consider the ways in which, as a parish and as persons, you can do more and do differently. It's a really wonderful opportunity that I've had to be with you and talk a little bit about the refugees of the world and how we can make a difference in their lives. And I invite you to continue being who you are, a really wonderful place that knows and understands what it is to follow the teachings of our Father. Thank you so much. Bless you all.